Welcome to my studio and welcome to another edition of Art Discussion with me, Adelaide Damoah. As you may know, I am an artist and I really enjoy probing the minds of other artists to find out what makes them tick and how they overcome some of the challenges that they have to overcome in order to survive and sometimes thrive in the art world, hence this series, Art Discussion. I then like to share those interviews in video format with you in the hope that I'm able to promote the artist with my small channel and also at the same time provide you with some kind of inspiration as well. So today's artist is the internationally acclaimed Godfried Donkor. Now, Godfried is probably best known for his collage art and for representing Ghana in the 2001 Venice Biennale. I met Godfried on a recent trip to Ghana during the time when he was preparing for his current exhibition at Gallery 1957 in Accra, and the title of that show is The First Day of the Yam Custom 1817. It is an epic exhibition. If you happen to be in Ghana right now, it's on until the 30th of October 2017. Do go and see it. It's a show not to be missed. I'll let Godfried explain a bit more in depth about, firstly, we start talking about this exhibition. So I'll let him talk to you about that because he explains it far better than I could. And then we will go into the usual art discussion interview. I hope that you enjoy this interview as much as I did. Enjoy. Okay, so let's start from when you knew that you wanted to be an artist and you know, what happened that led you to that decision.
Mm-hmm. So I think starting off, I remember that even in primary school, I could draw. And I think, you know, most people have that experience. They don't necessarily become artists. And I used to draw a lot of comics. And I used to draw a lot of Marvel comics and superheroes. And my most kind of potent memory was around the estate where I lived in Battersea. There was a newsagent. I used to always go in there and just literally sit on the floor reading the comics and going through pictures of Spider-Man and the Hulk, Captain America, whatever. And the guy got annoyed with me once, because most of the time I buy them. But I was actually going through to see which ones had action shots that I can draw. So he didn't know that. So he got pissed off with me one day. He said, "What are you doing? Are you going to buy them or what?" And I said, "Well, I just want to know ones that I can draw." And he said, "What, can you draw?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "All right, show me your drawing." So I went home and got him my sketchbook and showed him all the drawings I've been doing of Spider-Man, Black Panther, whatever, the Hulk. You know, pretty kind of basic stuff. And he said to me, "Oh, you're going to be an artist then?" I said, that was the first time I heard the term an artist in relation to what one could be. I was 14. My art teacher, who was because I was very close to him, obviously, because I did a lot of art. So I said to him, "What's an artist?" It's, you know, someone who makes a living out of making art or makes their career. I said, "Okay, I'm going to be an artist. What's the best art school?" And he said St. Martin's at the time. So I said to him, at 14, I want to go to St. Martin's. So he said to me, "Right, if you want to go to St. Martin's, we can get you there, but you got to do everything I tell you." I went to St. Martin's, and funny, I went to do fashion.
I read that.
Yeah, so I didn't go to do art, even though I thought being a fashion designer was still an artist. So I went to do fashion. I had a fashion portfolio, did my foundation. Halfway through my foundation, one of my tutors I think she wanted to test me. This just said to me, "Look, around about Easter time, you know, you can do fashion. You've done it for like 3 or 4 years." Because I used to make clothes as well when I was a kid. And she said, "Well, try something else. I don't want you to finish foundation without experimenting with other mediums. So try painting." And I bought some brushes. I remember going to the shoot store, buying 3 or 4 or 5 brushes, buying some acrylic paints or really cheap oil paints, getting a sheet of canvas. And I didn't even prime it. I didn't even know how to prime it. And I just put it on the wall and started painting. And that was it. Put the fashion books away, put all the drawings away, stopped making clothes and started painting. And then but I had to build a new portfolio to get into the degree of fashion, of painting.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. When I left St. Martin's, I set up a studio. I didn't show in those days. We just made our ad hoc shows. I wasn't thinking of galleries. I wasn't thinking of how I was going to earn money. I wasn't thinking of, you know, how I was going to pay rent. You know, these kind of things. We were doing it subsequently. I was doing other jobs to make money. And then I went to Spain for a year because I wanted to learn Spanish. Or actually, I spent 2 years there. And it was actually in Spain that I learned to run a studio or to work in, you know, to create a studio, because I worked as a studio assistant for 2 artists there. So I learned a lot in Spain. being an artist's assistant. One artist, for example, did a lot of cutting out and stenciling.
Yeah.
He was a spray painter, so I learned how to cut with scalpels and things, and this is what came into my collage.
Yes.
Another artist would use silk screens on his paintings and then paint over them. And all of this, I remember later on, I started to actually apply, because I was preparing the silk screens for him and then putting the images on first and preparing his canvas for him. He showed me how he liked his canvas prepared, how he had to wrap his work. All these things became very important to me later on. So when I came back 2 years later, I was doing work with friends. I used to do windows for Harvey Nichols. We used to do all kinds of things that we thought were fun, but I wasn't still thinking of an artist or having an art career. I was going to earn money. I was earning money doing other things.
When did you start then? When did that switch come?
Well, I think so. I went to do my MA and I did African art history in SOAS. I was curating for a bit, so I earned money curating while I was still painting. It wasn't until my first international show in '98 that I decided to have an art career. You see what I'm saying? That I was going to now make a conscious decision that this, I needed to make, this was solely going to be my work and this is how I was going to make my living, and so I had to be completely serious about it and not do anything else.
Was that one of the biennales?
Yes, it was the Dakar Biennale.
Dakar.
So that's the first one I did. Yeah.
Would you say that you started to take off from there?
Absolutely, because Dakar was a big deal for me. I won a prize in Dakar as the best newcomer, and then in '98 also I did a show of Okwi in Mexico City. I was working quite closely with people like that at that time.
Okwi
and Wezo.
And Wezo, yeah.
And Salah Hassan, and then 2000 or 2001 I did Venice. So it was just a lot of big shows coming one after the other.
How did that happen? Because, did you have representation at that time?
No, I was still not looking at commercial galleries. I was just looking at making large works purely independently. It just happened. I don't know how it happened. I think it happens to different people in different times. Yeah,
because you were representing Ghana for...
and UK as well.
And UK.
Yeah. I wasn't focused on commercialism still. I was making work which I thought was not fashionable, was not commercially viable. So I would survive essentially from making museum projects and from, being commissioned or being funded to make work for biennales and for big group shows.
Okay.
So that's how I made a lot of my... I didn't make enough money to really live last year because I still had to do other works, but I made enough money to make work.
Yep.
So I was able to always build up a body of work, which I can then show in various big exhibitions.
Yeah.
So that was what was sustaining me. In terms of my career, I was able to do big shows, but commercially I wasn't selling work.
Okay. And so you've mentioned, whenever you've talked about galleries, you always said worked with galleries as opposed to being represented by galleries. Would you say that's been the predominant model throughout your career so far?
I find the word represented by gallery a problem.
Okay.
And I always find emails when galleries post, "We are now represented so-and-so," a problem. I don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand why why a gallery needs to represent me for a start. It's a collaboration. The relationship between an artist and a gallery is a collaboration. I make work. The gallery will decide that, they have a buyer for that work. They'll take 50% and give me my commission, and then that's it. For a gallery to represent me, they have to do a lot of work. And I don't find that most commercial galleries do that.
Yeah. Which brings me to 1957 Gallery and where we are now with your current exhibition. And my understanding is that you had a kind of residency program with 1957 Gallery, which is inside Kempinski Hotel. And so they've given you a really big space and allowed you the time and freedom to be able to create the work, which then went into this hugely successful show, which I happened to be at the opening for. So congratulations, it was a fantastic show. But how did that opportunity come about?
Okay, so I think I met the gallery, or Marwan, who funded the gallery, or owns it, a year ago in London. And we subsequently met again in Ghana in October, November. And we didn't talk about gallery representation or anything. He said he wanted to work with me. And I wanted to know what that meant. And so he said, I'd like to do a project with you. And I said, okay, we discussed, we talked about it. He wanted to know what kind of project I would like to do. And I mentioned this project, which was something that's been cooking in my head for a long time. So I mentioned I had one project that I would like to make, but it's really big. I don't know where I can make it. It'll take 4 months to do, blah, 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 like this. And I wanted to do it here. And he said, right, I can do that. Let's do it. It all aligned, and it seemed that it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So I went away, started preparing. I had to, acquire a new studio and ship it down here. I started preparing literally from November last year.
Okay.
And then came down in April and started working 4.5 months, and you've seen the result.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. That brings us onto the actual project itself. Can you just talk through the project from what that year 1817 and the yam custom represents,
okay,
and then through to the work?
Yeah, I did an academic MA for a year. Was precisely this project. I wanted to find out material. I wanted to get historical material, archaeological material, ethnographic material, any kind of material on Africa that I can find and use to make work. In SOAS, I came across in a library, which is one of the greatest libraries you can go into, a book on the section on Ghana called Mission from Cape Coast to Kumasi, written by Thomas Bowditch, who was a kind of explorer, colonialist from 1800s, 1817, who came to this region. He was employed by the British government, came to the region, but essentially to research the people, and to give back to the British government all the information they could on the people, and so that they can use that in their future negotiations. So it had all these kind of political, slightly dodgy, imperialist connotations, but inside the book, which was mostly text, he made these drawings, coloured watercolours, of his encounter here. It unfolded, and in it, my mind just blew, because it was a scene of an Ashanti Durbar in 1817 that he drew and painted, hand-painted,
wow,
of the Asante and all the kings and princes, and it was just the most magnificent thing I've ever seen in my life. I just couldn't understand it, and I kept going back and seeing it again, and it became like a mythical thing in my mind. I was obsessed with that image, and subsequently he painted the city of Kumasi in that time. He painted the captains, and these was the first visuals I've ever seen of this region. Before photography, usually you see black and white illustrations. Usually they're quite primitive, they're quite rough. But these ones are beautiful color descriptions of people from this region, but in their glory. And from that day, I was obsessed with making an interpretation of it or version of it. But as I said, I put it to bed, and it was, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what size. I didn't know anything like that. So I was constructing it in my head and deconstructing and reading the book, but I put it to bed. So when I decided I was going to do it, I thought, I want to make it, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it large. I'm going to make it so that it's like a theatre. And I'm going to make it to have the impression, or for all the people to have the same impression I did when I first saw it. Because as someone who's fascinated by historical material, not everybody else is, so I have to make the image as out there, as in your face, as I saw this beautiful watercolor that he did. So I had to construct it in that way. Most of the show is based on Bowditch's vision of Kumasi when he came here. I stuck pretty much to script. I took liberties with color, because he worked in watercolors, but I worked in oils and acrylic ink, which gives me a real kind of
depth.
Yeah, and total contrast and really mad. And people, we always taught at school that oil and acrylic don't mix.
Yep.
I like that fact that they don't mix. So I started to mix them, and I've been doing that for 4 years now. And now I've got a totally different palette, because when you mix them, of course, they're separate, and I like that separation. Yeah. So I'm starting to use that. So I was using that in the composition. Of course, he didn't do that. But yeah, so the central figures are all based on him. And then I use images from, interestingly, 95 when I was here, 95 when I was doing my MA, I came here. And it was the previous Hassan thing in his Durbar. So, which was pretty much what Bowditch saw. This time it was in a state. It was at Kumasi Stadium. It wasn't out in the field. And I happened to go there. My aunt had tickets, so I was able to go there. I was able to take pictures. And this is how these things align. So I remember that I took slides. I took over 100 slides from that session. So when I was doing this, I realized that I had these slides buried somewhere in my archives. So I got them out, got them printed, and used those images from those slides, as well as images from Asante Hinidervas on previous times from the net. And because what I wanted to do was see as much as I could while I was painting what Bowditch was looking at.
Yes.
And Asante custom of 200 years or whatever, it's still predominantly the same. So I can show you, for example, an image of an Asante warrior.
Yes.
And this is what Bowditch painted.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it was amazing for me I needed to have this texture and this color range for my painting. But even though I was following Bowditch's watercolors, I wanted to have a realistic element to it. So I was using people that I was seeing Osu around here. I was taking a lot of pictures of the where I live, for my color range, for the background colors. So I was using the colors I was seeing today, but I was following the composition by Bowditch.
Yeah. Okay, so now moving on to just your career in general, and thinking about all of the stuff that you've been through to get to this point. What would you say was the biggest challenge that you've had to overcome?
I think the biggest challenge for me was deciding to be an artist. Basically, being African and deciding to be an artist. You just had no idea what it means to be one, until much later. So that was my biggest challenge. But I think I'm the kind of person that once I decide on something, even if I'm wrong, I'll stick to it, because I'm too ashamed to go back and start again with something else. So I'll just stick to it.
So it's stubbornness that's kept you going then?
Big time.
Yeah. Okay. And then in terms of achievements, I mean, from what I can see, just from what I've read, we've talked about some of them in terms of the biennials and big exhibitions like this one. What would you say was the one that you're the most proud of?
I think in terms of my achievement, as an artist, I've considered myself a bit of a failure, because I'm not talking about exhibitions, but in terms of my work and my process and learning how to paint, or learning how to to make collages, or learning how to make work as such, I'm frustrated all the time. So I'm always working at trying to overcome my frustration. I'm not kind of whether I show in a biennale or in a major show. As soon as the show is up, I'm not satisfied with the work that's there. So I keep going back to my studio, and often or not, I'm just frustrated and upset at what I'm doing, because I'm not able to put what is in my head out there. And I think in recent times I'm learning to give myself a bit of a break and not get too, and enjoy the process a bit more. So I'm enjoying. So my biggest thing now is I'm enjoying it more.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying what I'm doing much more. I know now that, because I've set up studios in South Africa, I've got studios in London, studios here now in Ghana. So for example, and I've had studios in the Caribbean. So I know now, for example, that I can set up a studio anywhere in the world. That gives me a lot of pleasure.
Yeah.
Knowing how to do that, knowing how to do it quickly, and have to do it to produce a certain body of work.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm enjoying it much more now. So that's a big breakthrough for me.
Good. You sort of hinted at the issues that you probably had to face as a consequence of being black and growing up in Battersea and deciding that you wanted to do art. In terms of your career in the art world since, how do you feel about have you experienced personally any kind of prejudice or blatant racism, that kind of thing, in the art world specifically?
I think I refuse to see racism because I find it absurd. I literally find it absurd. And I was born in Ghana. I came to London when I was 8. And my family, the way we were, I remember when I came to London, I had no culture shock. I had no illusion about leaving Ghana and coming to... Actually, I didn't want to go. My aunt forced me. And she was like, "You're stupid. You got a chance to go to London. You don't want to go." Because my parents were here and I was in Ghana. They were there. And I said, "I didn't want to go. I'm having too much fun here." So when I went to London, I had no concept of superiority or inferiority. So I've always had that in my life. I find racism just stupid. And so, yes, if I encounter it, I just deal with it like something stupid, that someone is just being really silly or unintelligent, or so I kind of turn it on them. And if I encounter it, I just move into another space where I'm able to do whatever I want to do. It doesn't stop me from making the work I want to make. In fact, it encourages me to make that work.
Yeah. And what difference do you see? That's something that I've personally noticed in terms of your attitude towards racism with diaspora people who were born in the UK or somewhere versus those who are born in Africa. Those who are born somewhere in Africa see racism exactly like how you see it the majority of the time. They just think it's ridiculous. And so for that reason, it kind of goes over their head more so than those who are just embedded in it for their whole entire life. How do you see the difference when you're working here as opposed to when you're working in London? Does it feel different to you because of race?
I think when I'm working here, it's not race as such, it's more that I come from Europe. And so I bring different things with me, or different baggage, if you like. Yeah, and I think, I remember when I first went to the Caribbean, and if you've been to the Caribbean, I don't know if you've been, the Caribbean, it's not racism, it's shadism.
Yes.
So in the Caribbean, it's the tone of your skin that makes, because the majority of people are black, obviously there's Syrians and stuff there, but it's the tone of your skin that shows where you're going to be in your career or in your life. And so I encountered shadism, and that had more of an effect on me than racism, until I had the same attitude to it that I do to racism, i.e. coming from Africa. So once I was able to adjust and treat it in the same way, I was absolutely able to enjoy myself and go through that process again. So I think what you're essentially asking me is about being the other.
Yes.
It's about being in a space where you are the other.
Yes.
And the way that I deal with being in those kind of spaces is to be myself, and then to kind of realize that actually I am the same as those people there. And so therefore I slowly merge and become one of them and not the other.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because I don't play the other part. I don't, like I'm not going to come to Ghana and eat only burgers and chips. Yeah?
Like some people do.
Well, I've heard that some people do.
Thinking about your future going forward, what would you say is the craziest, most ambitious dream that you have for your work?
Well, right now I'm thinking of building 3 studios in 3 countries. How crazy is that?
That's pretty crazy.
Not physically, but I'm actually mentally feeling like I can work in 3 parts, or actually 4 parts of the world. And I'm now trying to manage how I can do that.
Yeah.
So London obviously is my main place. That's where I have my place, my apartment, my family, everything. So I have to have a studio there. South Africa, I have to have one there. Ghana, I have to have one there. The Caribbean, Trinidad, I have to have one there. And maybe Senegal. So how does one manage that?
Oh, gosh.
And that's really crazy.
Yeah.
So that means it's very hard to have a family. The kids do the school run and things like that. So you have to consider all of these things. But yeah, no, it's a fantasy. It's not a realistic objective.
You seem to have, you seem to be managing fine at the moment with here and London.
Yeah, I think they inspire each other. So when I'm in Africa, whether I'm in Joburg or here, I'm inspired by London and my life there and the history there. I use a lot of that, reference a lot of that in my work. When I'm there, I reference a lot of stuff here. So I keep going backwards and forwards.
Yeah. Okay. If you could go back in time to when you graduated, which was what year again?
Oh dear, you want to give my age all the time? 89.
It's on the internet. 89. Okay, so if you could go back to 1989 when you graduated, what advice would you give yourself?
Looking back on it, I would say stick at it. Perseverance. For me, what I'm now beginning to learn, a couple of years now, I've just got this, is like you got to be able to be in it for the long game. Yeah, it's all about the long game. It's not about the biennials. They will stop. So you can have 5 years. I had 5 years of biennials, and then they stopped. you know, and then you may go 10 years without doing biennale, and then all of a sudden they'll start coming back again. But if you stop in the meantime, because you're fed up with not having any more biennales, and you start going elsewhere or being distracted and making different work or whatever, when the time comes around again, you're not nowhere to be seen. So I would say that, you know, endurance, longevity, perseverance, and just taking one's time. I've really enjoyed taking my time now to make my work, and not being anxious about if I'm in this show or not, if I've got this gallery or not, if I've sold this work or not. Because, you know, when I graduated, we were very anxious about everything. About whether we sold work, whether we were in that show or not, whether this person liked the work or not. That anxiety actually didn't help produce work.
Yes.
It didn't help us produce good work, I don't think. Not everybody's going to be famous, but everyone can make art. So if you're going to make art and be happy with not being famous or not being rich, then you just make your art. You know, but if you're making art just to become famous or become rich, then you're really all of the time in an anxious state of being, and you're not really making art.
Okay. So what about if it was a young stranger now, maybe someone graduating from St. Martin's now, and they came to you and they said, Godfried, I want to be just like you. Can you give me some advice, please? What would you say?
Well, funny you should say that, because all the kids coming out of St. Martin's now, they come straight out to galleries. They've got their career planned out already. They're more sus than I am. But no, I mean, I think, you know, because I mentioned fashion, and I think when I was switching from fashion to fine art, my biggest anxiety was, oh my God, I'm going to lose it. I'm losing it now. I'm not, you know, this is what I knew myself as somebody who wanted to do fashion. I was going into another world where I didn't know. It was very exciting, but it was terrifying. And I always thought, how can I merge the two? And it's taken me years to do it. Literally, it took me like 20 years. At like 2006, that's when I started to merge, when I did Jamestown Masquerade, where I designed some costumes and did I was able to mix fashion, performance, and fine art all into one, and seamlessly so. So we were able to use photography, we used to do a video, we had music, and we did it in Jamestown, here in Ghana, and it took a while to get to that. So for me, it's the same advice I always give. You got to take your time, you got to be persevere. If you really want to do something, you got to take your time.
Hello, welcome back. Thanks very much for joining me for that edition of Art Discussion with the wonderful Godfried Donkor. If you happen to be in Ghana up until the 30th of October 2017, do go and check out his exhibition at Gallery 1957 in Accra. It is an amazing show. You will not regret it. If you're not in Ghana at that time, then don't worry. Do check out Gallery 1957 website for some more information and some photos of the work in the exhibition. Do subscribe to my channel, because by subscribing you get to keep up to date with the latest exhibitions like this one, and you just never know where I'm going to end up. I mean, hello, I've just got back from Ghana and I'll be going again. So until next time, take care. Bye.